Walter Jenkins, an old man who only wanted to work in peace, was about to discover just how deep corruption could go and how far he was willing to go to stop it. The Louisiana sun bore down on the streets of Baton Rouge. Inside a small grocery store, the sound of an old cash register echoed through the air, thick with history. Behind the counter, his back slightly hunched but his dignity intact, stood Walter Jenkins, a 72-year-old African-American man whose weathered skin told a story of struggles, sacrifice, and resilience. He had been running that store for over 4 decades, the same store where his father once worked as an employee when whites-only signs still hung in certain establishments. To Walter, that business was more than just a source of income. It was his legacy, his way of proving that, despite everything, he had built something with hard work and honor. But times had changed, though not entirely. That afternoon, just as Walter was closing the register and preparing to lower the security gate, a pair of black boots stomped on the dusty floor of the store. The jingle of keys on Officer Gary Whitman's belt broke the silence. "Busy day, old man?" Whitman said with a crooked smile, his tone laced with malice. Walter looked at him without surprise. It wasn't the first time Whitman had come by, but it was the first time he carried that air of unchecked authority. "Officer Whitman," Walter responded calmly, resting his hands on the counter. The cop scanned the store, as if assessing every inch of the place, until his eyes landed on a crate of liquor behind the counter. "You got a license to sell that?" he asked, though they both knew the answer. Walter nodded. "Everything's in order, sir. I can show you." Whitman let out a dry laugh and shook his head. "I don't need to see anything, old man. What I do need is for us to work together to avoid any problems." Walter frowned. "What kind of problems?" The cop leaned over the counter, close enough for the old man to smell the tobacco on his breath. "The kind of problems that happen when authorities find irregularities in a business. Unreported inventory, maybe an undocumented worker, or worse, illegal substances." Walter felt his blood boil. "There's nothing illegal here." "That's what the report will say," Whitman said with a mocking grin. "But I can make sure you don't have to deal with all that paperwork. If you're reasonable." The old man clenched his fists. It was extortion, clear and blatant. "How much do you want?" Walter asked, his voice steady but carrying the fury of decades of injustice in his chest. The officer pulled out a pen and a scrap of paper, scribbled a number, and slid it across the counter. Walter looked down and saw the amount. $5,000. The old man swallowed hard. It wasn't just an enormous sum for him. It was a death sentence for his business. "I'll give you 2 days, Whitman said, tapping the counter lightly with his knuckle. "Don't make me come back empty-handed." And with that threat hanging in the air, the cop walked out, leaving behind the stench of his corruption. That night, sitting in his old rocking chair, Walter felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He knew reporting a cop like Whitman was useless. The system was designed to protect men like him. But Walter had something the officer didn't know. With trembling hands, he picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in a long time. "Dad," answered a voice on the other end. It was his son, Malcolm Jenkins, an FBI agent in New Orleans. Malcolm had grown up watching his father fight against adversity with unshakable integrity. Now, hearing his grave tone, he knew something was wrong. "I need you to come," Walter said. "It's urgent." The next morning, Malcolm arrived early. His presence was commanding, tall, firm, with the sharp gaze of a man who had seen too much in his career. "Tell me everything," he said, no preamble needed. Walter explained the situation, and Malcolm quickly grasped the real danger his father was in. "This man isn't just corrupt, Dad. He's dangerous. If he's extorting you, it means he's done it before. And if he's done it before, he'll do it again." Walter nodded. "I know, son. But what can we do?" Malcolm gave a slight smile. "Leave it to me." That night, when Whitman returned to the store, he found Walter waiting behind the counter, holding an envelope. "Hope you did the right thing, old man," he sneered, reaching for the envelope. But before he could grab it, a voice rang out from the back of the store. "Stop right there, officer." Whitman spun around and saw Malcolm, holding up his FBI badge. The cop blinked, confused. "What the hell is this?" Malcolm took a step forward. It's the end of your career. Whitman laughed nervously. You don't know who you're messing with, friend. Neither do you, Malcolm shot back. We've been investigating you for weeks. We have recordings, witnesses, your little extortion ring ends here. Whitman tensed. You can't prove anything. Malcolm pulled out his phone and pressed a button. Whitman's own voice filled the store. Don't make me come back empty-handed. The officer turned pale. This is a misunderstanding. But before he could move, 2 FBI agents stepped through the front door. Gary Whitman, you're under arrest for abuse of authority, extortion, and criminal conduct, one of the agents announced, cuffing him. Walter watched in silence as the man who had tried to destroy his life was escorted out of the store. This isn't over, Whitman muttered angrily. Malcolm placed a hand on his father's shoulder. Yes, it is. The following days felt strange. Walter noticed how some customers looked at him with respect, while others, those who had sympathized with Whitman, walked past without saying a word. But he didn't care. One morning, as he swept the front of the store, Malcolm showed up with a cup of coffee. How are you feeling, Dad? Walter smiled, with the quiet wisdom that only years can bring. Strong, son. Stronger than ever. And for the first time in a long while, the old man felt like the world could change, even if just a little. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If this story made you reflect, don't miss the next one I recommend here. It's another important perspective to understand and fight racism. Click now, and let's keep talking about what matters.